Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Although I was up really late last night. I'm on this beer league team with my wife as my defense partner.
Oh yeah,
Our
the
game,
provincial champion beer
we
league
were,
team,
yes,
The River City
Pigeons.
Pigeons, right?
So the games are all at 10:45 at night, which is not atypical for
Oh,
beer league. But you
yeah.
finish playing hockey at midnight. It
Hmm.
is so hard to get to sleep.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
geez. Anyway, it's a ton of fun, and
I
I
have
would
trouble
love to
getting to
get to.
sleep after watching a late game, let alone playing in one. Get the old adrenaline going a little bit, and you
I've
just
also
can't
been
turn
uh,
it off.
I've also been agitated the last few years because I watched this. I don't know if you watch Homeland, that series with Claire Danes about the CIA spy.
No.
7-year series. I
Oh
watched
yeah.
season 7, and I usually don't get too worked up about shows, but that was so unbelievably suspenseful. It's kind of
Oh,
left me a little bit shaken, honestly.
really?
So,
Wow.
quite a dramatic performance by Claire
Claire Danes. I,
Danes,
I remember her
fantastic
as
actress.
remember her as Juliet
She
in
was
one of
great
the
as
Romeo Juliet and
She was great,
Juliets.
and she was in My So-Called Life way back in the 90s. But if you've never seen Homeland, Bruce, you might want to have a look. It's a fantastic series.
Mhm.
Okay, the Oilers. We're
Yeah,
going to talk about a few things today.
yeah.
Um, we're going to talk about the lack of activity by the Oilers and almost every other NHL team on the waiver wire. If we're,
Yep.
we can. Some people might want to single out the criticism of the Oilers, but everyone else kind of saw it the same way.
Yeah, they
Because
didn't take Daniel Sprong. Damn it, Oilers, when
every team's
30
in.
teams all passed on the same guy.
Well, not every team has the same wingers as the Oilers, so there's that.
Oh, this is true. I mean, obviously. But,
We're going to talk about Ken Holland's press conference, where he got a little feisty. Had to
hmm,
like that. And we're going to talk about the Oilers' new line combinations, the ever shifting sands of the Oilers' line combinations. They are written in sand on the beach, Bruce. Those
yeah.
line combinations. Okay, so
The
the waiver
tide comes
wire,
in every 12 hours.
yes, totally. So the just like it's been for the last forever. So the waiver wire, there had been some interesting players, somewhat interesting players, um, more interesting to some than others on the waiver wire. Josh Ho-Sang, Daniel Sprong, um, Casey Kasem. Is that who that is? The
Uh,
goalie, Casey DeSmith.
Casey DeSmith.
Okay, Casey DeSmith. And the Oilers, obviously they have a lot of players who are not big name players on the wing right now.
Hmm.
Thomas Yurcho at the top of the list. A name so unfamiliar that only 15 people on earth can pronounce it correctly in Edmonton, at least. Um, the Oilers have a lack of depth, and they've got a lot of unknown players on the wing. Nygaard, Yurcho, Kara, Granlund, Archibald, Chason, Neal. Like these aren't exactly guys who scored a lot of goals in the NHL last year, to put it mildly. So, what did you think, Bruce? They didn't pick up. They had Sprong scored 14 goals. He seemed the most obvious guy that they could have just nabbed for nothing. What do you think?
Yeah, he was the most obvious. I mean, Ho-Sang, another one who's not really a goal scorer though.
Come on,
Sven Berchi, who was tempting, but his contract was
and
not.
his injury history. Why is
And
Vancouver cutting
yeah,
the guy he can play?
Nikolai Goldobin, Marco Dano. I wrote about all these guys in the thing yesterday. And the thing was, they were all, 22, even 22 years old on the waiver wire. A very exceptional case of Daniel Sprong, but 23, 24, 25-year-old guys. But you know what? The Oilers are already kind of chock-a-block with those guys. And when you take a step back, it's easy to sit back here in a distance and project, say, Nikolai Goldobin as a future top six winger. But the fact is that he's not a top six winger now, because if he was, there's no chance in hell his team would be waiving him, right? So you need the same kind of blue sky projection of the guys that were on the waiver wire that were already applying to all those guys you just named that Holland added to the roster on the wings this summer. And they're all his guys. almost none of the Oilers wingers right now are guys that he inherited. Or else he renewed them. Like he re-signed Kara, he re-signed Chason, he re-signed Patrick Russell, and he went out and he got a bunch of other guys. And the cherry on top uh, was getting Neil, of course, and getting out from under Lucic.
Yeah. You
So,
handpick those guys, Bruce. Like you kind of
mhm,
handpick these guys, like these,
yeah,
and you bring them all in, and
yeah,
there's a like an honest competition, right? Guys have worked their way up. Patrick Russell, Joe Gambardella, they're all working for it. They're all, and let's face it, on a certain level, a lot of these players are very even in ability. There's not a lot separating them. So
no,
you bring in suddenly you if you were you have this kind of honest competition and you jettison some other guy, you say, actually, none of you guys are all really the same, including this guy that we just brought in, if truth be told, is really similar to you as, and we're going to favor him over you. I think that could create some bad feeling. Like what you need from these bottom six guys is they got to be the team players, the guys who are building the team, fitting in on the team, finding their roles, loving those roles, support players. And I think there's something to be said for just having that kind of, okay, you guys are the guys. This is the competition. We're not going to upset this. And I just thought bringing in a guy who's not much better than the other ones, or if better at all, is going to confuse things. I mean, Bertasov was already confusing enough, right?
yes, yeah.
So
They
I
did give
think
him a
they'd
look.
gone down that route, and they just thought, no, we can't take a flyer on Pontus Aberg at this point.
Right.
We're gonna, Pontus Aberg being the what's that word, like the symbol for this kind of player that we've.
Mhm.
When is the last time a waiver wire player really turned out for a team? Now I'm sure but what this all reminds me of, Bruce, and I can see your big brains working on this, but what this reminds me of, remember a few years ago, the Toronto Maple Leafs took a defenseman who ended up
Mhm.
sitting the whole year, I think. And
Yeah.
everyone in Edmonton, when he was taken by the Leafs, I'll have to look this up because now it's bugging me who it is. When he was taken by the Leafs, everyone, like not everyone, many people in Edmonton, the waiver wire junkies, were all saying, like, why didn't the Oilers take so and so? Like, he could have helped our defense and this, that, and the other thing. But when is the last time?
Well, every once in a while, a team will pick up some gem that doesn't fit or whatever, doesn't click with the coach or line mates or whatever in his old team. I'm thinking like Paul Byron. Montreal got him from Calgary, as I recall, and he scored better part of 20 goals on his new team. That was like a theft, but it wasn't like a superstar, and it wasn't like a core player or a guy that became an integral to the team. He was a useful part, and on the waiver wire, that's really the best you can hope for. And I'm on board with the take that um, a lot of it, there's so much. These are human beings, and sometimes we forget that, and we play NHL 19, and we plug a guy in and we plug a guy out,
Yeah.
and you don't know what the background is. You don't know what the negotiation with the guy was. You come on board, we're going to give you an honest chance. Oh, no, wait a minute. We like this kid that some other team cut loose because he's not good enough for their team, but we think he's better than you, so get lost. I mean, there's some of that, and there's some of it's also ego on the part of the GM saying, well, I've already constructed my team. Why would I want to go out and pick off somebody else's rejects and have to reshuffle the deck? And so often in the preseason, you see, in fact, I think these two waiver claims today, one goalie, one defenseman, were the only two of the entire preseason. Every day there's names on the wire, and every day someone like Friedman would come on and say they all cleared. And today, two of them didn't clear, uh, but that's it. And all of the forwards, which it looked like a pretty decent crop of forwards on the waiver wire, every single one of them cleared. So that's
So the defenseman I was thinking of, and I think this is the guy, is Frankie Corrado.
oh yes, yeah.
He was like when he was on waivers, is like the Oilers should take this guy. Like he's going to be the answer. Blah blah blah. And what a smart pickup by the genius Toronto Maple Leafs. And
Well, I'm not sure anyone said quite that, but they did say. Oh, I do remember people saying Oilers had priority over Toronto. They should have took this guy because he was a kind of a good skating right shot defenseman.
he
But you're
played
right. He sat in the press box for most of
over
that season.
yeah over 2 years. He played 41
Yeah,
games for the Maple Leafs, had 6 points and minus 12. So there you go.
difference maker.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not saying you should never pick up players on the waiver
No,
wire.
I mean, and there are times like during the season, like last year, picking Colby Cave up on waivers, small thing that it was, but Kyle Brodziak had been struggling to that point. The Oilers were at bottom six was struggling, and Colby Cave didn't come in and score a bunch of points, so he didn't solve that problem. But he did come in and play some half decent hockey and did buttress the lineup a little bit. And but that was a specific fix partway through the season where the right guy came down. Shirley knew the guy and thought, oh, he can help us a bit, and he did help a bit.
Maybe a goalie now and then might make sense. Like it's maybe better to take a waiver wire goalie than trade for Al Montoya, who has a extra
Yeah,
year on your
but it's
contract.
hard to anticipate in October 1st that your goalie might be injured, your second goalie might be injured on December
Yeah, and we don't
15th.
know if Koskinen
You
will
know,
flop or Smith will flop, or if both of them
uh,
will be okay. Like we might have some horrible
mhm,
foreboding about that, but
yeah,
we don't know. All right, Bruce, let's move on to Holland's press conference. So it was an
sure.
interesting thing. There was a little bit of controversy in Oilerland after this waiver wire thing, and I thought the interesting thing, first of all, was Holland bang right there to answer the questions about it. Good for him.
Nice.
And I think that kind of accountability, it doesn't matter if the team isn't winning, honestly. It doesn't
I
matter how good you are at PR, but I think it did this was a really interesting thing that happened. Right away, bang, Holland's there answering all the questions. Good for him.
Yeah, and then right on the radio right after to do more of the same. And I guess start of the season is one of the sort of GM needs to speak to the fans, but he did speak, and I didn't see him, I just heard him, but I'm guessing he wasn't wearing a tracksuit. Like
Did
this guy,
Shirley wear a
he
tracksuit?
strikes. He did. He strikes me as being a professional. Holland does, and
Yeah.
that brings at least some degree of security is not the word, but uh, he gives the impression that he knows what the hell he's doing, and
Well,
is and what he says kind of hangs together,
he was
and what he does.
part of a management team that made the playoffs 25 years in a row.
Yep.
And you got to learn a thing or two in those 25 years, and you have to have some spine, and he showed it. So there was an interesting moment where Sportsnet's Mark Spector, a former Journal colleague of mine for a long time, and a guy who does a lot of good work on the Oilers, I believe, said that he kind of put it to Holland, like, you know, he suggesting, like, Oilers fans have been awfully patient here, and you can't tell them that the team might not make the playoffs. And all of a sudden, Holland jumps in and he says, I don't think I've said that. You might have said that. Don't put words in my mouth. What I've said from day one is that our goal is to compete for a playoff spot. And I think actually Speck's characterization there of kind of what Holland was saying didn't strike me as like it was ringing some bells. Like I haven't heard them beating on a drum. We're making the playoffs in 2019-20 or 1920 as Holland keeps calling it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
keep going back a century every time I hear that.
yeah, I know that
Like
bothers
we need to go out and get Sprague Cleghorn to solidify the defense. Put the fear of God in every other team.
Frankie Frederickson still playing. All right. Uh, so anyway, so I liked I didn't mind Spector's characterization. I thought it was accurate actually. But Holland really jumped all over it and he said, no, we want to be in the playoffs. We want to compete for a playoff spot. And he laid out his plan for that. He said, we've got a nucleus of players. We need to surround them better. On the short term, on the 1 year, on the 1920 look, our goal is to put some veteran players on the bottom part of the roster and compete for a playoff spot. So this is the key idea that he addressed a number of times. He came back to 2 or 3 times during these interviews. Is this group of players that he's brought in, who he thinks will make a big difference in the bottom six, or he's hoping. He doesn't
Right.
know, and he says you don't
No,
you don't always get it right. He knows that, but he maybe it will work out that way, Bruce. So what do you think? First of all, of this idea of bringing in forwards, not trading anything for them, not giving up anything for them, just kind of the like odds and ends players, if we're
hmm
completely honest, who he thinks can make a difference, like Darcy Hordachuk did back
hmm
in the day for the
Yeah,
Oilers.
yeah,
Eric
right,
Belanger,
right, right. Yeah, yeah. We got Eric
Leonard
Belanger
Petrell.
now. We can trade Andrew Cogliano for a draft pick 2 years down the road. Yeah, don't
Okay,
get
so
me
what do you think?
started.
Let's.
What do I think? I've been writing about this a lot throughout the summer because roster building, as you know, is one of the things that I'm really keen on following. How do you build your team? How do you go about it? And they've got a new man at the helm here, but a very experienced man who's seen a few rodeos over the years. And it became apparent fairly quickly that the target group was guys, he called them 24 to 28. I'd even say 25 to 28-year-old guys, mostly 26 to 28-year-old guys. Um, that he called professionals and whatever. They're near the peak of their career, and he said they're pros whether they're coming from the NHL or whether they're coming from Europe. And certainly he added well three players from Europe, two forwards. Maybe you don't give Holland credit for Joel Pearson, but certainly for Haas and for Nygaard you do. He went and got Yurko, who he knew from Detroit, who was an AHL player last year, but he fits in that Yurko. He fits in the same uh, category. 26-year-old player, has got a few miles on the odometer. He's near his peak, and he knows his time is running out, and this is his chance. And then on top of that, you add all of Granlund, Archibald, down the middle, they Sheehan, and you look at that team. All of a sudden, it's quite experienced. Like they even like a couple of those Europeans, obviously with no NHL experience, but it's a young team. I mean, Ethan Bear is the youngest player on the team, and he's 22 years old, and they've only got like three or four guys that are under the age of 25. And what I particularly noticed about the additions was they were all signed to 1 year contracts, and mostly they are guys old enough that they'll be UFA at the end of the year. Holland doesn't mind taking that chance. Because he knows he's not keeping all of these fellows. If somebody hits it out of the park, he might be a little more expensive to re-sign him, but uh, Shirelli got into a world of hurt signing guys to 2 year deals, and we're still
Yeah,
paying for that. Still paying for the second year Eric Greiba, paying for the second year Kyle Brodziak, paying for the second year what turned out to be Sam Gagner after a series of transactions of guys with term remaining, because that was the only way you could deal. And they've got, uh, it's 2 year deal seemed reasonable at the time, but the second year is not even a lead pipe cinch. The 1 year deal, um, Holland's got a million options at the end of the year, and some of those options are the young kids that now have a little bit of breathing room to develop further down in the AHL, and that seems to be the way they're going with most of them, with Ethan Bear being the one obvious exception.
you know that movie, Bruce, where Matt Damon goes to Mars? What's that one
Yes,
called?
The Martian.
The Martian. So everything goes to hell when he's up there, right? There's a big storm, and then he decides he's gonna live, and he says we're gonna science the hell out of this
Uh-huh.
problem. And I see Ken Holland coming into Edmonton and saying we're gonna Daniel Cleary the hell out of this problem because so Daniel Cleary, I was just looking. Daniel Cleary was 26 in his
He had
first year.
three goals the year
He
before, I
got
think.
well, he got 3 goals his first year in Detroit.
Oh, was it? Okay.
But they but he became a really valuable role player for 3 or 4 years in Detroit. And I think that's kind of the idea. He's trying to get five, six, seven guys like Daniel Cleary, 26 years old, about been through a lot as a pro player, been through enough to know you better do what you better do what the coaches said, and you better do it like as well as you possibly can and as enthusiastically as you can at all times. That's got to be Daniel Cleary in his first year in the Red Wings because he's been through it all. He knows he's not the hotshot anymore, and so that's
Right.
what all these players are. And I like this idea. So I like it for a couple of reasons. I mean, it's not like the Oilers haven't brought in veteran role players in the past, but they like to bring in, they often brought in guys in their 30s who are kind of
Yep.
past it. This has been a constant theme of me bitching about this for some time now because it's never really worked very well. I mean, the best case scenario was Mark Letestu, who kind of worked for a year. Who worked for a year? I'll give Letestu that. But I don't think he worked in the final year or two of his contract, or whatever that was.
Final
And,
one
and
year. Yeah.
none of the other ones worked. In fact, most of them were utter disasters here on more than 1 year contracts. So I like that. And the other thing that he did that I really liked here, so he brought in guys at the right age and he paid the right price. You
Yeah.
know, Shirelli tried he went from both ends. He brought in some older guys on bigger money contracts and traded for them. And they often had a couple years on their deals, like Korpikoski had, I think, two years when he came in, and Letestu got the contract, and Brodziak 2 year deal. So I didn't like those moves. But then he also he paid a huge price for Griffin Reinhart, right? Trying to get that player in the right age group to come in and help the team right away. But this would be the equivalent almost of trading the ninth round draft pick Broberg for, I don't know, like some guy who hasn't really panned out in another city as a defenseman or a forward. And they didn't do that. He paid the
Hmm.
right price for these guys, which was zilch, just the price of their 1 year contracts, almost all
Yep.
of them
Yep.
$1 million a year. So
Yep.
good. You know, I like, in theory, Daniel clearing the hell out of this problem on the Oilers was a great idea, and I think we both advocated it for some time now that this should be the approach.
Well, given the amount of cap space he didn't have, which is
Yes.
very, very little. I mean, if you look at the sextet of forwards that he signed, which was Sheahan, Archibald, and Granlund that were NHL forwards, Yurcho from the AHL, Haas, and Nygaard from Europe, and they were all 26 years old, give or take a year. And the six of them combined cost $5.8 million, and they all signed 1 year contracts.
Sweet.
So next year, maybe two of those guys are back, maybe three or four if everything works great. But he's going to have options. He's not stuck with a guy that's 35 years old and injured, and he's not stuck with a guy who's had a poor year, but you have to, he's under contract, so you're stuck with him. Uh, he's going to have options, and in the end, maybe it's going to be a case where Oilers wind up losing a guy that you wish they could have kept. But I'd rather that than getting the whole 50-man list bogged down with guys that have term remaining after they've proven they're not really going to cut it.
Okay, so the last thing that we'll cover that he said was that he talked about developing prospects,
Hmm.
and they were asking him, I don't know if they named anyone. I think it was Jim Matheson of the Journal asking him this, and I don't know if Matty named anyone, but I think Evan Bouchard came to mind, maybe
Yep.
Tyler Benson. How long
Yep.
are these top players going to stay in? How long are they going to bake in the bake? How long will they be in the AHL? And because what we're used to, Bruce, is Draisaitl goes down for a week, he's back. Nurse goes down for a week, he's back. Puljujärvi goes down for a week or maybe a month at most, or 2 months most, and he's back. The top prospects, even if they get sent there, they don't stay there.
Yeah.
But Holland really put a kibosh on that. He said, Christmas, probably maybe the full year, and unless they're going to be playing top 6 minutes or top 4 minutes, it sounded like in Edmonton, like the role that he envisions
Hmm.
Benson or Bouchard playing in the future. They're
Right.
not going to come up here and play on the fourth line or the third pairing. Like, that's not how it's going to happen necessarily. So what did you think of that plan that he was spelling out?
I think that's probably the Ken Holland that everyone was expecting, frankly. The overbake in the bake. Uh, what they call overripen. Those are Bob Nicholson's words.
Yeah.
Well, this
Now
is
we're going to
right down.
overbake.
This is right down the alley of that. Um, and because they now do have these 26-year-old options up here, they can take a little bit more time. Now, I'm still of the mind that if Evan Bouchard comes out and he just crushes it out of the gate in Bakersfield, especially if, say, Ethan Bear and Joel Person struggle, then he might be the option number three or something, and we might see him before Christmas. But I don't think we'll see him in October the way we saw Nurse that 1 year,
And
that
Draisaitl
his first pro year, or Draisaitl in his second pro
second.
year.
Although Draisaitl, like, honestly,
He should never have gone down
he
that
should
year.
never
That
have
was
gone down.
a boondoggle on bonus cushion that Shirley got himself into. That's a whole nother story. But uh, the other guys, I mean, there are enough. I mean, even if you look at the roster now, there's 14 forwards on it. with a couple more on the injured list. Well, one more that's going to come back in Riley Sheahan. So there's 15 forwards on the list. And I'm not sure you can look at that forward and say, oh, that guy can't play. He's going to be out. I mean, we're going to have to see some games. And we're going to see some shuffling from within the spares that they already have on hand before they even think about going down to Bakersfield, barring, of course, an injury bug.
Well, that Bakersfield team, and I know most people aren't excited about the Bakersfield Condors,
I am.
but I am. Like we are, because we actually watch these games now and then, and like we're into it. But I'm really like, there's never been an Oilers farm, like, except the lockout year when Taylor Hall and Nugent Hopkins
Well,
went
yeah,
down.
that
That
was
doesn't
a
count.
real
But like
exception.
in terms, like this farm team is good enough. If they played the Oilers in 5 games, they might win one of them. I mean, when could you ever honestly say you've seen that? Like this is a really good young team. I mean, they'd have to get better goaltending, and the Oilers would have to get crappy goaltending. I'm factoring that in here, Bruce. But they have.
I was going to make the old joke that they might be able to beat the Oilers, but how would they do against an NHL club? But that would be mean, so I'm not going to do it.
So they have like their top line. Let's just quickly, we won't dwell on this, but
Yeah,
their
the
top line:
lines, yeah.
Benson, Marody, Curry. That was their big unit last year. Then they got Gambardella, Malone, and Yamamoto as their second line. They've slotted Yamamoto in there on their shutdown line. Their third line looks like it's going to be Maximov, McLeod, and Sam
Oh,
Gagner, and Cameron Hebigs, the 10th forward, and Luke Esposito, who is a really good AHL player. And then on defense, they've got Lagesson and Bouchard is their top pairing. Lowe and Jones is their top pairing. And then they got Samorukov and Desharnais with Skinner and Starrett and Wells in net. So, wow, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to watching these games.
yeah, I intend to watch quite a few more games this year than last. I think, there's a lot of the future that's down there. Last year, a lot of these guys were in the junior ranks or elsewhere. Now they're turning pro. Bouchard and McLeod and Maximov, of course, and Samorikov. Those are interesting players, and they're adding to most of what was already a first place team in Bakersfield. So the team is almost too stacked. Like today, I hear they sent Ostap Safin down to Wichita so he can get some real ice time in the ECHL. And I mean, that's what the ECHL team is for, and it's a good logical move. But it's nice to have such depth that they're not saying, well, we penciled Ostap Safin into the top six, come hell or high water, we don't have any other choice. And that's not the situation at the moment at all. So, and
Yeah,
we were,
go ahead.
I just said we were also going to talk about the Oilers lines.
We are. Let's do
Yeah,
that. Yeah, let's
yeah.
do that. So, the ever shifting lines, as I mentioned previously, and they are like they've changed day to day now.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we're seeing now, it are lines that we never. I don't believe we ever saw these lines in the preseason games. Like he's now moved to lines, except for no, we have never seen these lines in preseason games. I'm quite certain of
Oh,
this. Not one of them. Not one of the combinations that now they're presumably these are the lines that we're going to see on opening night, Bruce,
right.
because you're getting they got to practice together.
Well, I thought
So
that yesterday, but I was
yeah,
wrong
so
because
so
they're
these
all
are different
different.
than, so we had McDavid, RNH, and Draisaitl at center yesterday, but now we've got Nygaard, McDavid, and Neal as the top line. Draisaitl, RNH, and Cassian as the second line. Kara, Cave, and Archibald as the grind line. Cave taking the spot of Riley Sheahan, who's injured.
Right.
Granlund, Haas, and Chason as the fourth line, and Yurko and Patrick Russell as the spare forwards. And the defense are we won't get into the defense because they look like what we've seen.
Very
So
set.
what do you think of those lines? Do you like them better
Well,
than yesterday's lines?
your show has gone from McDavid's left wing to a spare part in one day. I guess he must have missed the net or something on it too often yesterday. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's the thing. They have so many players that are sort of at equivalent level to one another that there's a ton of competition, and there's going to be a lot of churn, to use an old Chiarelli term, within the lines. Nygaard adds some real speed on McDavid's wing.
I like
That
that.
that gives and Neal, of course, is more of the sniper, not the speedster. Draisaitl and RNH. Now that's a pair that we never saw last year. It was either McDavid and Draisaitl or McDavid and RNH, but it was never Draisaitl and RNH, and now they're together. And they played together uh, that year we just talked about, where Draisaitl got called up in October. He went on the line with RNH and Taylor Hall at that time, and that was the Oilers' second line behind the McDavid line. And they were brilliant for 2 games, and then of course McDavid got hurt, and that was the end of that experiment. But Cassian is no Taylor Hall. But RNH and Draisaitl are a lot more mature players now than they were then. That looks like a second line that ought to be able to hold its own and then some. 3 veteran players.
We'll see how it works. Like
Mhm.
I like Draisaitl at center. Obviously, he's a center. What I like about this roster, Bruce, and I like these lines quite a bit more than yesterday's lines. I don't know why, but they just seem to hit the spot better with me. I like James Neal and McDavid. I think these guys really know each other well. Maybe they can develop some chemistry. And I Nygaard's last game was very encouraging. He made some really great plays with the puck. He's very fast. He's looked better and better every day. I like to see Haas in the lineup. What I like most about this entire forward group is they essentially now have 6 players who are NHL plus skaters, like who are above average, at least above average NHL skaters. So that would be Nygaard, McDavid, RNH, Archibald, and Haas, Cassian, and I guess they have 7 Draisaitl.
Leon.
So Leon. So they have 7 players now. Last year they had 4 of these guys, but they've added 3: Nygaard, Archibald, and Haas. That's a huge change in this roster. Like, and you've dropped Lucic, who was lacked agility, and Brodziak, who might have been the slowest skater in the NHL last year. So this is a big difference. This is huge. Like, I think it's actually really big. It just opens up the game for your team when you got these guys who can fly around the ice. So I'm really encouraged by that overall. I just love that Holland talked specifically about dressing team speed. It was the first thing out of his mouth when he mentioned the 25 to 28-year-old Daniel Cleary pack of players. So I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and the key, I mean, now they will be able to apply at least some pace to the game from every line. And they have, the question is, will the defense be able to move the puck up to these guys that they can get the speed going through the neutral zone with the puck and, bring the attack that way. The Kara Cave Archibald line, that's the slowest line, and Archibald's pretty fast, and Kara can get it moving. I'm not sure he's the most agile of players, but Archibald's a bit of a buzzsaw. I've liked what I've seen out of him, especially as training camp progressed. I thought he got a lot better. He was a bit invisible at first, and we're really seeing his
I've liked him
the breadth of his game in the last couple of showings. So
Granlund's a mystery to me. I don't really know what he brings, so we'll see what he brings.
I think he brought some kind of a injury that he was nursing. He missed some camp time. He missed a couple of games where you didn't know why certain players weren't in the lineup. Of course, they had more players in spots, but from the sounds of it, he had something, and whether it bugged him from the beginning of camp or whatever, but he only really got cleared on last weekend. So we have not seen the player that Marcus Granlund's going to be.
Alrighty. Well, tomorrow night, big game. See what happens.
All right. Game for points in the standings. 2 points up for grabs against the Vancouver Canucks. So we might as well get start with a intense rivalry right off the hop. 8:00 start. It's a doubleheader, so it's a weeknight. It's a late start for home fans, but hopefully be worth the wait.
All right. Thanks for talking today, Bruce.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. Thanks for listening.